Do you really know your neighbors? Get ready to discover the dark side of the people living next to you. In this video, you'll hear real-life horror stories that happened right under your nose. Don't be fooled by appearances, terror might be closer than you think. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Let's move on to the first story. Shortly after I moved into my first apartment, I started having strange encounters with one of my neighbors in the laundry room. I had to pass through one of their parking spaces to access the laundry room in the building, especially if I didn't want to get wet in the rain. He would hide in the shadows, which sometimes startled me, but I figured he was also trying to avoid the rain. I tried to be friendly, but he just stood there, smoking and staring into nothingness, without saying a single word. This started to get weird, so I decided to change my laundry day to just once a week. One day, I was in the laundry room, messing around with my phone, when I noticed a red light blinking from a distance. It was that neighbor filming me with a camera. I panicked, ran back to my apartment, and told my friend, who was staying with me for a few weeks. The panic faded because I wasn't alone that night. My friend went out, and as soon as he left, I started hearing loud banging sounds, but since I sleep with earbuds, I wasn't sure what it could have been. The next day, when I went to leave, I noticed that the wood around the lock was all damaged. I asked my friend if he had noticed anything, but he said he came back late and was too drunk to be sure. I thought it best to call maintenance, and they informed me that someone had tried to break in. Scared, I decided to look for another apartment. Luckily, my new roommate had a beautiful and giant dog. One night, while she was away, I heard the dog barking around 3 in the morning. I got up and went to check if the window was securely closed, and fortunately, it was. The next day, my neighbors asked me if I had locked myself out of the house, and I said no, asking why. To my surprise, they told me that the screen covering the window was all bent and broken, as if someone had tried to get in and had been interrupted by a huge dog. The worst part is that my car had out-of-state plates. My friends kept urging me to change them for safety reasons, as around here, it's common for out-of-state plates to get stolen. So after this incident, I started thinking that someone might have been following me because of my car's plates. Anyway, I might just be scared, considering the break-in attempts, but those people could have been looking for money or jewelry. My husband and I lived in a condo in a rough neighborhood with low-income residents. There were always break-ins, and the place was relatively close to the city center. It was mid-April of last year, and I was 7 months pregnant. My husband and I would occasionally go out to the balcony late at night. The balcony was more like an external corridor, with several stairs connecting the apartments on the outside. It was either very early or very late at night, depending on your perspective, and it was quite dark. My husband and I were outside, looking at the moon that illuminated the neighborhood. My husband was smoking, and I couldn't sleep due to back pain, the joys of pregnancy. We were talking about something when, out of nowhere, in the middle of the darkness, on the first floor, we heard someone talking. It startled us, and my husband and I fell silent. A man's voice was whispering directly below us, giving me chills. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but something about his voice made it sound like he was talking to himself. While we stood there trying to hear something, we noticed the voice moving away from us. Then we heard a sound coming from the stairs. He was slowly climbing to the second floor, still mumbling. My husband instinctively put out his cigarette and came over to me. When the man reached our floor, he looked to be in his late 30s to early 40s, but he appeared older. I'm not sure how to describe it. His hair was very gray, and he looked very tired, but something in his eyes showed agitation. My husband said the guy must have been on drugs. My husband wasn't an innocent teenager. He had some knowledge of substances. Unexpectedly, the man was walking with a dog, a beautiful blue. He approached us, and my husband stepped in front of me, protecting me. The dog stopped, and then the man, as if surprised to see us there, jumped and laughed. "Hello, oh my god, I didn't see you there, ha ha ha, sorry. I'm walking my princess." He had what you might call a crazy look. His eyes darted around until they fixed on me, on my huge belly, in a weird way, as if he had gotten angry. "Are you pregnant?" he asked, as if he didn't understand. I answered yes, and he said, "You're pregnant?" "Yes, my wife. That wife was a midwife and she helped women with childbirth. Yes, babies are wonderful, I have two." "Well, my wife, my ex-wife, I guess. I have a hard time explaining the peculiar way he spoke. He seemed desperate but excited, you could tell he needed someone to talk to. I'm one of those nice people who always listens to everyone, but my husband is the type who just doesn't care and isn't interested. So, he cut the guy off and said, "It's very late, we're going in. Have a good night," to which the man responded, Sure, sorry, I'm Mike, by the way, I'm Mike." Mike then extended his hand to shake, and I accepted. His hand was sweaty. I immediately let go, but he didn't seem to notice. He grabbed the dog by the leash in a strange way. Every muscle in my body was screaming to get away from this man, but I still said my name. At this point, my husband simply took my arm to pull me back into our apartment. Mike was watching me very intently. As soon as we got inside, we locked the door and started talking about the guy. My husband thought he might have been on meth. He also commented that it was strange for the guy to be walking a dog at 3 in the morning, climbing the stairs of a building where he didn't even live. I just agreed and said he must be a junkie. My husband thought it was best to take the gun to the bedroom, and I tried to sleep. 3 nights later, we were back on our balcony in the hallway of the building. The building across from ours was also an apartment building, and moments after we went out to the balcony, Mike appeared, looking at us, walking with his dog. He had a weird smile. He then went to the stairs. We waved to him and went back inside, locking the door. 2 days later, I was getting out of my car around 4 in the afternoon, and he appeared practically inside my car. 1 second I was gathering my things, and the next, he was there, without the dog this time. He started a strange conversation about how my daughter would be beautiful, just like me, and how lucky I was not to have divorced, because that ruins people's lives. I could tell he was extremely depressed. He told me that his wife and daughters had left him a few months ago. My husband then yelled for me from the balcony, and I made up an excuse just to get away from him. My husband interrogated me about what was said and asked me to stay away from that guy. That night, someone knocked on our door. I checked my phone. It was 3:30 in the morning. I have several annoying neighbors who like to get drunk, so I decided to wait for another knock before getting up. Again, someone knocked, but this time with more urgency. I was hot, pregnant, and tired, so I nudged my husband with my foot and said someone was at the door. I put on my robe and went to see what was going on. Before opening the door, I froze and decided to use the peephole. Through the peephole, I couldn't make out what I was seeing. I tried to focus my eyes, and, without moving, I realized something wasn't right. It didn't look like the hallway. Then I looked again. It was Mike's eyes, very close to the peephole. I was even more frightened, and my body went cold. I started sweating. I stepped back from the door and tried to catch my breath. Again, another knock. He knew I was there because he started calling me. He must have seen my shadow through the peephole. I turned and ran to the bedroom, shook my husband until he woke up, and told him what had happened. My husband was alarmed, got up quickly, grabbed the gun, and told me to stay in bed. Of course, I heard him telling Mike to leave. Less than a minute later, my husband came back to the bedroom and said the man had gone away. He also told me that if I heard anything else, I should wake him up. I agreed but couldn't sleep the rest of the night. Several weeks passed before we heard about Mike again. In fact, we had forgotten about him until our car was broken into. The police came to collect evidence, and we told them about Mike, his invasive behavior, and that we suspected him. They seemed confused until we mentioned the dog, at which point the officer turned pale. He asked for a description of all of Mike's behaviors and then wanted a statement. Mike was arrested 2 nights after the Peephole incident for attacking a pregnant woman at her home, 2 buildings down from ours. He suffered from post-traumatic stress from his time in the force and was a meth user, as my husband had suspected. I feel relieved that I used the peephole. I think my neighbor might be following me. Sometimes I feel like my life could be the plot of a book or a big Hollywood movie. Anyway, it all started after I moved from an apartment where I lived with strange roommates to a place where I lived alone. I began buying furniture and other things. A few weeks after moving, there was a fight across the street. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a fight, right? Aside from that fight, my building was generally quiet and calm, but, being curious, I peeked through the curtain. Since there was a large tree in front, I thought no one would see me. 2 days later, I went to take out the trash and saw two people, roughly where the fight had happened, taking some pictures. It wasn't late, but I knew they were taking pictures because of the camera flash. They looked like they might be police officers. Anyway, I didn't see anything unusual for a while. One morning, when I took my car out of the garage, I noticed a white paint stain. Well, it didn't look like a stain, more like a scrape from something else that left white marks. I had parked the car on the street the day before. However, yesterday, I went to take out the trash again and saw a guy in a white car, with all tinted windows, with the driver's window completely down, staring at me. Well, I was wearing a short dress, but I don't know if it was because of my outfit, when I realized that the paint that had fallen on my car was also white. The guy who was staring at me looked strange, but I didn't think much of it. The next day, at my front door, I found a note saying, "Don't say anything. Don't look out the window, or worse will happen." So today, much more terrified than before, I was coming back from the store when, turning the corner, I saw a strange guy with something in his hand. I thought it might be a weapon, so I didn't get too close to him. Strangely, that same white car drove by a few seconds after I saw that weird, unfriendly guy. I continued on my way home and, while putting away the groceries, I saw a black car, with equally dark windows, driving in the same direction as the shooter and the white car had gone. And then I heard screams. I thought about calling the police, but I got anxious about the possibility of them finding out it was me. I'm starting to feel paranoid. I don't know if these things are happening because sometimes it's a gang war, or if I'm going crazy, or if there's really something strange happening on my street. Should I move?
A bit of context. I was living with a close friend in an apartment complex in a rough neighborhood, full of crazies, but nothing we couldn't handle. Except for our neighbor next door. Oh, this all happened 3 months ago. The apartment complex was smaller than the others, with only 2 buildings and a basic pool. We lived on the ground floor. Directly in front of us was the door of our neighbor, whom I'll call Jack, with a small area like a kind of foyer. The space was so small that if we both left our apartments at the same time, we'd bump into each other. Jack loved his foyer. He placed flowers and always swept to keep it clean. We didn't care and didn't pay much attention to ours. We thought he just wanted to make his apartment look nicer, which was fine and respectable. We lived there for 2.5 years and never realized how obsessed he was with the foyer until, one day, when I came home with my girlfriend after dinner, we found a note stuck to our door. The note was written like a ransom note, and it said, "No smoking in the foyer." We took the note off the door and looked at each other, confused, until Jack's door opened and he came out to us. Apparently, he had been waiting for us to see the note because there was no way he could hear us if he wasn't glued to his own door. He looked at us angrily but spoke in an oddly calm tone. The conversation went something like this. He said, "Did you read the note?" "You mean this note?" I held the note up in the air for him. "Did you read it?" he said, stepping closer. "Yes, but we don't smoke in the hallway or in our home. We smoke in the parking lot, so it wasn't us," I replied. "It's a foyer," he responded softly. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you," I said. "It's a foyer, and I need to keep it clean, so stop smoking here," he said, turning his back to us and slamming his apartment door. We were stunned. I mean, I had never even spoken to the guy in the last 2 years I lived there, except for the occasional good morning and hello when we crossed paths in the parking lot or in the foyer. We went into the apartment, talking about how the place was full of crazies, and forgot about the incident. We watched a movie, had some drinks, and went to sleep. The next day, it was Monday, so I woke up early to go to work. My roommate also left early, so only my girlfriend stayed in the apartment. Since she worked only in the afternoon, she should have been sleeping, so she only texted me around lunchtime. I also avoided texting her early so she could sleep. That day, she never texted me. She responded to my good morning with, "He's trying to break down the door." I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. So I started freaking out, ran to my boss, told him someone was trying to break into my home, and he let me go back. On the way, I tried calling her, but she wasn't answering. I decided to alert my roommate that someone was trying to break down the door, so he was also on his way. Meanwhile, I was worried that my girlfriend might be hurt. She managed to call me. She was on the phone with the police. When she answered, she was crying heavily, not making much sense, and was hysterical. I tried to calm her down enough to understand what was happening. She said someone was banging on the door, trying to open it, and she thought it was the neighbor. He didn't have a weapon, but he was shouting and kicking the door, and he wasn't shouting kind things. I was furious, so I sped up, trying to get home as fast as possible to see if she was okay. I stayed on the phone with her the whole time. When I arrived at my apartment, the police were leaving, saying they knocked on the door and no one answered. Seriously, why do you think no one answered? I wanted to say that, but I let it go and said I wanted to file a report. They wrote it down and left. He didn't even come back to check if my girlfriend was okay. I went in, and he wasn't there anymore. Only boot marks on the door and a note written in red, "No smoking in the damn foyer." The note was horrendous, looking like it had been written by a patient, and instead of being taped with just one strip, it was secured on all sides. I took the note down, went inside the apartment, and found my girlfriend hiding in the closet, crying heavily. I tried to calm her down and gave her some water. My roommate walked in and looked very angry. To lighten his mood, I showed him the note that was on the door, and we went to the neighbor's door. But as soon as we left the apartment, he opened the door, saying, "Did you get my note?" "Forget your note. Who do you think you are trying to break into my house?" I said. "What do you mean? I just put the note on the door," he replied. "No, you were kicking the door, pulling on the doorknob, and trying to get into my house," I retorted. "I just knocked on the door. I never did any of those things you're talking about," he countered. "My girlfriend was home, and she's still shaken by what you were trying to do." "By the way, I heard you yelling on the phone," I said. He froze. That's when I realized he thought there was no one home. But then he said again, "No smoking in the foyer," and went back into his apartment. My roommate shouted, "Forget your damn foyer," and kicked his door, which I found even somewhat funny given the situation. But we figured he must have done this before, when no one was home, and thought he'd get away with it again. We believed he just wanted to break our door. My girlfriend was so scared she didn't leave the house for a week, using her vacation days. She couldn't go out alone for fear that he'd be there. A few days after the incident, the wife of this guy, whom I had never seen in my life, only heard her angry screams, came to my door. She explained that he had schizophrenia and OCD, so he meticulously cared for the foyer. After that, she asked, with a creepy smile, if she could use my oven to bake brownies. I definitely thought these people were crazy. I told her no, and that both she and her husband needed to stay away from anyone coming in or out of my apartment. And if he yelled at anyone else, I'd call the police. Then, I shut the door in her face. I was furious with those crazies affecting the lives of the people I love. So, I decided I needed to move. I found a place in less than a month. My roommate followed suit and finally left that hellhole. I haven't seen my friend since the move. I hope whoever moves into the apartment doesn't smoke in the foyer. My friend and I went out for dinner, and I told him what happened. We talked about the incident. He told me he once saw the guy's wife leave the foyer talking to herself and smelling like smoke, but didn't think much of it until the commotion happened. Generally, we didn't talk about it when my girlfriend was around to avoid scaring her even more. But since I'm no longer with her, the theories came back with force. And we believe that the one smoking in the foyer was the guy's wife.
Thanks for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss any new and terrifying videos.